Hey everybody, Marcin here, and today I want to talk about something that actually popped into my head today. So when it comes to the Donkey Kong Country series, it started to shift from what it originally was. And that's not always a bad thing, but I feel like a lot of us felt a little bit weird when it came to Returns and Tropical Freeze. They're two very good video games. Returns I actually changed my opinion on because originally I was not a fan of it, but I played the HD remake and my mind changed. I think it's a great game. So they're both very good. But as Donkey Kong Country titles, there was a major change that a lot of us weren't really a fan of. That being the absence of familiar faces. The biggest culprit of this being the villains. They had none of the original villains at all. No forms of them, period. That was a major letdown. And the biggest letdown, emphasis on biggest, because boy is he big, was the big bad croc himself, King K. Rool. He was absent from both of the games. That was a major letdown. If they had only done it in one game, maybe, but to have him absent in both games, it was kind of like they were just trying to erase him. But even regardless of that, it was strange because the title that brought back Donkey Kong Country had returns in the title. It was insinuating that this was the return of Donkey Kong Country, which it technically was, but you would think the return to something would have the old stuff there, or at least some of it. And my biggest thing when it comes to all of this with the newer Donkey Kong Country titles is that I wanted them to mix old with the new. And when it comes to mixing old with the new, I'm not just talking about the enemies. I'm talking about pretty much all of it. And this is where the idea that I had today comes into play. When you think of the original trilogy, besides the villains, what is something that the newer titles don't have? It's something that was a part of the formula when it comes to the original trilogy. Think about Donkey Kong Country into Donkey Kong Country 2. What were the biggest changes? You had changes to the enemies, but then you had changes to the animal buddies, and you had changes to the playable Kongs. To the point where the main character of the series isn't even playable. So something that was a ton of fun about the older titles was that when you played the next game in the series, you had an amazing blend of old with the new. For some people, it could have been annoying, because maybe Donkey Kong is their favorite Kong, and now he's not playable. But overall, when you think about it, it makes the series exciting. You play the new entry, and you don't know what familiar faces you're gonna see, or which new faces you're gonna see. Dixie Kong ended up being one of my favorite Kongs, and she was just introduced completely new in the second Donkey Kong Country game. That is crazy when you think about it. They decided to not have the main character playable and ended up creating a Kong that ended up being one of my favorites. I love Diddy Kong too, don't get me wrong, but Dixie Kong's just a little bit cooler. But they did this with the animal buddies too. You didn't know which animal buddies would return and which new ones you would get. That is one of the biggest things missing from the newer titles of the Donkey Kong Country series. In Returns and Tropical Freeze, there is only one playable animal buddy, and it's Rambi. In both titles. When it comes to the Kongs, I will say in Tropical Freeze, it was really cool that you had Donkey Kong, Diddy Kong, Dixie Kong, Cranky Kong, and Funky Kong as playable Kongs. It was awesome to have all those Kongs playable. But I think they should take it a step further. I think they should have a bunch of Kongs playable, but also have new Kongs playable. And I actually think that they could take inspiration from Bananza. Because I don't think they should get rid of the new Kongs from Bananza. I think they could have two family tree lines. The Donkey Kong family tree line, and a family tree line from the new Kongs. They could have a new Kong that's related to Poppy Kong, Grumpy Kong, or Void Kong. I really do think that mixing old with the new was the biggest thing missing from the newer Donkey Kong Country titles. Because they brought back a bunch of Kongs, which is awesome, but we didn't get any new Kongs. And when you think of the older titles, that was one of the biggest things. The second Donkey Kong Country game literally had Diddy in the title. And then the third Donkey Kong Country game had Dixie in the title. They became main characters, and they were introduced as new Kongs. And then with the animal buddies, they only brought back Rambi as a playable animal buddy. No new playable animal buddies at all. And then when it comes to the enemies, they were all new. None of the older ones came back. So you could make the argument that they did mix old with the new, because they had a bunch of old Kongs come back, they had an old animal buddy come back, and then they had a bunch of new enemies. But what I mean when it comes to mixing old with the new is with all of it. So have old Kongs and new Kongs, old animal buddies and new animal buddies, old villains and new villains. When it comes to King K. Rool, they could have very easily had him fit in either of the new titles. In Returns, they literally could have just had him had a tiki mask on. And when it comes to Tropical Freeze, Lord Frederick already kind of plays like a K. Rool fight, so they could have just thrown a winter jacket on him. Even though Donkey Kong Bananza was incredible and it was awesome to have a new 3D Donkey Kong game come out, that doesn't mean that I want them to stop making 2D games. The Donkey Kong Country titles are some of the best platformers I've ever played, so I definitely don't want them to stop. But I will say that the formula that they're following for Returns and Tropical Freeze is not the formula that I want them to do for a new game in the series. I want them to go more in line with the formula of the original trilogy, mixing old with the new with all of it. This was even something they did with Donkey Kong 64. Lanky Kong is one of my favorite Kongs, and again, he was a Kong that was just introduced into the series. That's an element missing from these new Donkey Kong Country games that was a ton of fun. Having new Kongs to get into is just exciting. You never know when a new Kong could come along and become one of your favorites. And then think about it, they could have Amiibo. Amiibo. Imagine a new Kong getting introduced and now they're one of your favorites and they have an Amiibo to buy? That's a freaking dream come true. And then don't even get me started on the Smash Bros potential. Oh my gosh. Could you imagine when the next Smash Bros game is coming out and we start speculating that one of the new Kongs in one of the newer Donkey Kong Country games could possibly be in the next Smash Bros game? Thinking about movesets and how the reveal trailer could be, and then imagine seeing that reveal trailer for the next Smash Bros game. A new freaking Kong joining the roster of Smash Bros. Now don't get me wrong, I still want some of the older Kongs to join the Smash Bros roster, but that doesn't mean that I wouldn't want to see a new Kong join the roster as well. This whole mixing old with the new thing transcends over to other games as well. Having it with Smash Bros would be incredible. A reveal trailer with old Kongs and new Kongs? Freaking sign me up. And then they're probably guaranteed an Amiibo, if they continue doing what they did with Smash Bros Ultimate. I really just want the Donkey Kong universe to grow, and it's something that was constantly happening with the older titles. I don't think there's any reason that they should stop that. They technically did it with Bananza by having Void Kong, Grumpy Kong, and Poppy Kong. They may not be part of the Donkey Kong family tree line, but it's still expanding the universe of Donkey Kong as a whole. And that's part of what makes playing a new Donkey Kong game fun and exciting. Not knowing what to expect, and having new stuff starting to become some of your favorite things from the Donkey Kong games. So for me, when it comes to Donkey Kong Country, I don't need it to be exactly like the old titles, but I do want it to follow their formula. I think their formula is what kept it exciting. You legit never knew what to expect. And you could make that argument with the newer ones, but it's in a different way. I'd rather it be more like the original trilogy, which is mixing old with the new when it comes to Kongs, animal buddies, and villains. But please, keep K. Rool. So I'm really hoping that the next new Donkey Kong Country game really throws us for a loop. I want to be just as excited as I was for Bananza, and I really think that they can pull it off. I just do think that they need to change the formula from Returns and Tropical Freeze. I think they need to go more back to the roots. But that's just my opinion. Let me know in the comments down below on what you want from a new Donkey Kong Country game. If you enjoyed this discussion, don't forget to like the video. And if you want to stay up to date with my videos, don't forget to subscribe. If you want to support the channel, consider becoming a channel member. And until next time, I'll see you all later. Take care, everyone.